Thank you for coming. We like to stand on opposite sides, so it drives Greg, our videographer, crazy because he used to keep going back and forth. So as Tom said, I'm the lighthouse keeper in Watch Hill. I've been there for 26 years now. Jane was the assistant lighthouse keeper for about 10 years. I'm on the second floor, she was on the first floor. So we want to talk to you about the history of the Watch Hill Lighthouse, and then we're going to slide in a little bit about the life-saving station, because so many people seem to be asking us about that lately. So Jane, take it away.
So this is just a beautiful drone picture that was taken by our friend Zach Perrin. It was just this winter. If you notice, the sun is going to set into the ocean, and it only happens a certain time of year. It happens in the winter time. So if you ever are looking for a reason to come to the lighthouse, you should get there for a sunset. It's just amazing. So I'm going to start off by telling you about what's on the property, and then hopefully fill in some of the blanks about what used to be on the property. So if you visit now, you'll see this keeper's residence and the tower. It was built in 1856. The first floor has 5 rooms, and the second 7 rooms, and the second floor has 5 rooms. Basically, it's 2 layers of brick. And before the hurricane of 1938, there was a lookout tower on the top of the keeper's residence. So a little bit later, when we get into some of the photos, that's how we know when the photographs were taken, because we look for things like the lookout tower. So we know sometimes, oh, before 38 or after 38. The tower was constructed in 1856. This is the tower that's there now. And it was made out of westerly granite. The bricks at the bottom are slightly bigger, so although it's a square structure, it does get a little bit narrow at the top. The bricks get a little bit smaller. The interior is round, however, round brick, and I actually have a couple of pictures that we'll just pass around. There's this cast iron circular staircase in the center of the round tower, and it just leads up to a lookout platform or the lantern room, and there's 8 ladder steps up to the lookout tower. It's 45 feet tall, and then the actual lantern, the light on the top, takes it up to 61 feet above sea level. I just said that there's 36 steps, and then when you get to the lantern room, the Fresnel lens used to be up there. The Fresnel lens is now in our museum, but it was in the tower from 1856 when it was first built, and then decommissioned in 1986 when the lighthouse became automated. We always tell people when they want a tour of the tower, we don't take people in the tower very often at all, and it's because it's 1856 construction. The brick is crumbling. There's a rope staircase. It is definitely a tricky climb. But there's the beautiful lantern room at the top. That lens that's up there now is not the Fresnel lens. It's the automated lens, so it has an acrylic lens, just acrylic. It's like your car brake light cover. It's an acrylic lens. Some of them are white, some of them are red. And then there's a little tiny light bulb that's up there now. So this photo is the acrylic lens with the tiny light bulb. So the Fresnel lens actually had a 1,000-watt bulb in it, a pretty large light bulb. And when it was decommissioned in 1856, we switched to I call it the 6-disc CD changer. It's 6 little light bulbs that change automatically when one of them burns out. So it's just, when one burns out, it just flips to the next one. So we can go around too. So that's what's up there now. What's pretty amazing is that those little 50-watt LED bulbs are just as powerful as the 1,000-watt lamp that was in the original Fresnel, right? Technology. Oh. So if this picture was taken, if you're standing, there's a compass rose on the lawn of the lighthouse. And basically the keeper's residence in the tower would be to your left, your back would be to Napatry, and the building on the left is the oil house, and the building on the right is the fog signal house. On the other side is Block Island. So if you're kind of getting your bearings, Taylor Swift is to the left. Everybody's bearings are Taylor Swift, so. So the oil house was built in 1900, and basically it was used to store the kerosene. Kerosene was used to burn for the lamp. Before that, it was whale oil, and the whale oil was actually stored in the basement of the lighthouse. But kerosene is a little bit more dangerous and more flammable, so it got moved outside. In 1986, the oil house became the museum. And then it was the museum until 2007, when the Foghorn building was renovated to house our growing collection. So the Fog Signal House was built in 1909, and it originally housed a compressor that powered the foghorns. The foghorns were on the front of the building. And then before 1938, there was also a lookout tower on the top of this building. And it's been our museum since 2007. And just last year, we had another renovation, so we made the shipwreck room.
Go ahead.
If you were here last month, we talked about the shipwrecks. So we have 2 rooms to the museum, and the Fresnel lens is in this main room, and the shipwreck room is to the right. We've just incorporated some nice photographs, right? Some things that we didn't capture all of them. Some of them are from our Instagram. But this is a view from East Beach, and then this is a view from above.
So a couple of things we just want to point out. So obviously all the lighthouse property is way out in the front here. This is all lighthouse property down to here. From here down is a private road. Doesn't belong to us. We only have a right of necessity, not even a right of way. So the oil truck is necessary so it can come down. But if I want my friend Sarah to come down, that's technically not a necessity, so they could say no. So we struggle with that a little bit. But of all this property, we'll talk later in the presentation about a couple of buildings that are gone. The new boathouse, this is the foundation, which is still there. The old boathouse was over here. And if you come to visit, you'll see the pilings for the rails and the ramps are still in the water and on the rocks over here. And in 1908, they built a second, better life-saving station for the guys basically to live in. They kept the boathouse for a while, then built a new one. But they built a new building for them to live in with an enclosed lighthouse. And that was at the top of the hill, and you can see the walkways are still there. While we have this up, a lot of people ask, you know, where's the lowest point when storms come? First place the water comes over is always right here. This is the lowest place, and it kind of comes right across. An average winter storm, especially a nor'easter, all down here usually comes over the rocks, across the scrub, and usually the access road will be covered with water until the next tide cycle. And then major storms, maybe once or twice a year, the water comes right over the wall, right across the parking lot, right across the grass, and dumps on the other side. So often in the winter, it's a true island. And then Superstorm Sandy was pretty much from this house to this house, right at that level. This was kind of untouched. Everything else past it, the dirt, the rocks, pretty much there was maybe a 12-foot drop down to where it was taken away, and they actually rebuilt it all. So I just want to jump in with 2 things. One is, last time we talked, we mentioned that there were 2 divers up front who had dove on the wreck of the Onondaga. Well, of course, this week, not only do I have the chairman of the Lighthouse Association in the audience, but let me see if I can get this right. We have the 5th great-granddaughter of the original lighthouse keeper in the audience. Was I right on that? Yeah, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to pull out a couple of key dates over the past many years. It's not everything that happened, but I think it kind of paints a good picture for you. So a long time ago, before there was a lighthouse in Watch Hill, there was a warning tower and a beacon built. It was actually built on Bear Hill, which is the highest point in Watch Hill, and that is where Taylor Swift lives. So this tower was used to warn colonial residents of Rhode Island that enemy ships were approaching, and this was during the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War. And then 1789, so I guess the point there too is that for nearly 300 years, Watch Hill Point has been significant. The location has been really significant. In 1789, the U.S. Lighthouse Service was established. Basically, the federal government took control of all the lighthouses, and Alexander Hamilton became the first superintendent of the lighthouses. Again, I think this was the first major public infrastructure system in the United States. Still a young country, but this was one of the first, and I guess it makes sense with maritime trade and travel was how people got around, and we got our Amazon products. Nope, that wasn't right. And then in 1806, Thomas Jefferson commissioned the building of the lighthouse. And again, this was the reefs off the coast were extremely dangerous. The passageway into Fisher's Island Sound was very narrow, and there was a need for this sort of protection on the coast. The land was 4 acres, and it was purchased from George and Thankful Foster of Rhode Island. In 1807, the first lighthouse and keeper's house was constructed. So originally it was a wooden tower, and it stood about where the museum is now. So it was much closer to the shoreline, and the residence was not attached to it. But it was definitely the beginning of continuous lighthouse service in Watch Hill back in 1807. In 1827, the light changed. So it used to be a steady white light, and then it changed to rotating white light. And that's because mariners confused the Watch Hill Lighthouse with the Stonington Lighthouse. So it was also the first time that lighthouses were becoming more recognizable at sea, and they were actually starting to use a unique light signature. So certain lighthouses looked a certain way. So this was the first time that this was starting to happen. In 1834, Jonathan Nash was removed from office. He was the first lighthouse keeper. He served for 27 years, and in that time, he recognized or reported 45 shipwrecks. And he was removed for political reasons, but at the time, lighthouse keepers were political appointments. So it might sound more scandalous than it really was, right? It's just a political appointment, so a political dismissal. So a few more important dates in the 1800s. There was a decision to actually rebuild the lighthouse. As I mentioned before, it was pretty close to the shoreline. The shore was eroding. The wooden tower was starting to deteriorate. So it was decided that a new tower and a new keeper's residence needed to be built, and it was going to be about 50 feet back. And it is where the current tower and residence is. And it was made with much stronger materials, those granite blocks for the tower, as well as bricks inside the tower, and the actual construction of the residence was bricks. So in 1878, the United States Life-Saving Service was created. And basically, the number of shipwrecks continued to rise. It was, a very busy passageway, and there was a need for the life-saving service. So Watch Hill became a very important rescue location. And the keepers had their job to keep the light burning, and it really was a physical and laborious. It was a tough job. So they needed help. There were shipwrecks happening. People needed to be rescued. So this service was created. Bob's going to tell you a lot more later about the crew and how they trained and how they practiced and what they needed to do. So a little bit later, in 1908, there was a new life-saving station that was built. This is important because of the growing need for the rescues, the servicemen, the equipment changed. The original life-saving station had an open platform, so while the servicemen could get up top, get a 360 view of what was happening, they were not protected by the elements. So the new building had an enclosed tower, and it had really better areas for the crew. The crews lived there, so it just had better accommodations and a better spot to store all of their equipment. In 1915, the Coast Guard was created. So the life-saving service merged with the revenue cutter service, and today they created the United States Coast Guard. And they were assuming responsibility now for rescues all along the shore and protection of the coast. Watch Hill continues to be an important part of this national infrastructure. So the Lighthouse service merged into the Coast Guard. President Franklin Roosevelt ordered that the Lighthouse service merge. So again, this was just centralizing all of the coastline rescues and operations under one federal agency. The Coast Guard still maintains our light and still maintains our foghorns. In 1945, the life-saving station closed. So after World War II, there was just better technology. There was the transportation, industry had changed, and it was becoming a much bigger job. So the Coast Guard actually, all of their rescue operations shifted to New London. So New London took over bigger areas. And then in 1963, I feel like the life-saving station had one more training evolution, and that was for the Watch Hill Fire Department. The fire department actually burned the life-saving station down in a training evolution. I think what's probably most upsetting about that is we try more and more frequently to preserve historic buildings, especially along the coast. But at this time, it was more of a, take it down, make room for more, and we're done with it, we don't need it. But I think efforts today might look a little bit different. And then this is just the last 40 years. The lighthouse became automated in 1986. That Fresnel lens, that beautiful Fresnel lens, was decommissioned because we have modern technology that could change that lamp. And we also were lucky that the property was leased to the Watch Hill Lighthouse Association. So finally, local members of the community are starting to care for it and preserve it and are becoming really, really interested in it. Just over 2 years ago, ownership was officially transferred to the Watch Hill Lighthouse Keepers Association. The government considered the property surplus, and after a long bid process, they transferred ownership to Watch Hill. So your lighthouse is now locally owned and preserved and protected. So now we have a lot of photographs, and again, this is when I said that we just put them in so you can see that, this is what it looked like. It is in some chronological order, but we do some guessing too about when we think this photograph was taken. This is definitely, late 1800s, early 1900s tower and residence. We know the lantern room at the top is black. This is a picture of the life-saving station, the old life-saving station. And I know the pictures aren't too great, but this is the old life-saving station. And you can see the lighthouse in the background. We know it's the old station because the new one had a lookout tower, so it was much taller. And obviously this is from East Beach, right, that view. Yep. Another picture of the life-saving station with the rescue boats. Bob's going to talk a lot more about the life-saving station, so.
If there's any time left,
In that case, so this is the same building. I always go back and forth with these two. This is the backside, like on the Carousel Beach side, and then this is from the other side. So you can see the road that leads, that's the Lighthouse Road. So that's a garage, and then this roof line is actually the roof line from the other vantage point. So the boats are just on the other side. So remember I was mentioning the lookout towers. You can actually see them on both the fog signal house and then the keeper's residence. And they're not like big stand up in the lookout tower. They're kind of like your head could pop in, but you could get a 360 view. So we know this was before the hurricane of 1938. There's also a little, like a little workhouse that's like this one, kind of like a little garage. And then that's a barn that is actually built into the hill. And from here, you're actually looking at the second floor. So it actually is 2 stories. So from the other side, there was a hayloft in there, and it's built into the hill where closer to where the brick wall is when you're on the property. So this has both life-saving stations in it. You can see the old one closer to the front, way over on the right, and then the new one with the lookout tower. So for a while, both stations existed. It's a little bit later. You can also see both. There's actually two boathouses. So this is the old station. There's the new station, and then there's the new boathouse. You can see the pilings, the ramps that go out into the water for the boats to be launched. Again, 1930s, because this is the lookout tower, the lookout room is at the top. And those are the huge foghorns on the front of the building. So the 1938 hurricane, a couple of things to notice in this picture. This is actually taken from the yellow house that's on Watch Hill Road, so which used to be the steamboat ticket office. That yellow home also had a big dock, and there's a steamboat ticket office. But the boathouse is actually off the foundation and in the water. This seawall is not in good shape, and ironically, that's the same seawall that was destroyed with Superstorm Sandy.
Almost in the same spot. It
Right.
broke.
I always think how impressive the life-saving station looks. I mean, the lighthouse is huge and very impressive, but when you look at the life-saving station in the picture, it almost, makes the lighthouse look tiny. Again, this is just another picture of the hurricane damage. You can see the boathouse off its foundation a little bit better, and how, much that wall was destroyed. And the bucket adds some sort of artistic, I don't know. Right. So just some erosion from the 1938 hurricane. You can see actually the concrete pad that's being supported, right underneath it. So in the 1940s, just slightly paved road, right? It was paved, right? Maybe not all the way.
The middle was.
Yeah, the
just
middle
the
part.
road up.
There's a garage there. Again, back to the keeper's residence, does not have a lookout tower on it. We did read that the fog signal building lost its lookout tower, but another one was put on. And then when the roof was changed years later, they actually never put the lookout tower back on again. So it was damaged in the storm, put back on, and then gone again. Lots of buildings on that property, right? I think what's sort of interesting here is these are actually concrete stabilizers that are in there. And so now we have the granite rock, right? That granite that like interlocks, and it creates a really nice foundation for to keep the shore from eroding. But back in the 40s, there were actually some concrete like stabilizers. You can also see pretty far in the back what looks like a white brick tower, a tall white rectangular structure. That's actually a wooden tower, and this next picture shows it a little bit better. It's a wooden tower that was painted white and to look like brick, and it was actually hiding a communication tower. So it was during the war, and it was actually hiding a tower. This picture shows military barracks. That's in the very front, the structure at the front of on the point. You can see the foghorn building and everything else there, but that was a military barracks that housed eight men. The foghorns way out here. If you notice that there's a nice granite wall around the property. That wasn't there. Actually, I don't remember when that was added. Late 40s?
Yep.
Yeah. Hurricane Carol in 1954. You can see the foghorn. It was already on a pad. There's a concrete pad in front of the fog signal building right now. You can see that pad, but you can see how much the land eroded. These are the same photo, just two different pictures. You can see the windows all blown out.
And this is very similar to the damage from Superstorm Sandy. That was about how much of a drop-off there was right from the fog signal building at an angle to the lighthouse.
If you can see these right here, they're actually wooden water lines. So they almost look like 4x4s, and they were hollowed out. So that's the water line, and those were destroyed in Hurricane Carol. So in the 60s, check out all of that wall reinforcement. It's starting to look better and better. The shoreline is getting what it needs to protect everything. You can still see the foghorns in the front of the building. And then, oh, there it is, the Watch Hill Fire Department. And I think the most important thing here is that they've changed. So now they're a small electric fog signal device that's there. So the pad is there, but that's the smaller device now. You can see the communication tower still there. I'm done talking.
Oh. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you.
I assure you, she will talk again. A couple of things we just brought from the museum. That's a blueprint from the 1856 when they proposed replacing the existing keepers with the new building. So it's kind of nice, it shows you how the inside layout was at the time, where the windows and all were. The basement's only partial. But one of the interesting things is the blueprint just has a flat tower because it wasn't their job to put the lantern on top. So it wasn't even in the drawings at all. It's just a tower with a flat top. And the other thing we brought from the museum is, this is from 1856 as well. This is when they came down and kind of did a sketch of where the current lighthouse was and the lighthouse keepers, and then the dotted line is where they wanted to add the proposed lighthouse and tower. And then the barn she talked about is also on this drawing. But one kind of cool thing about, and the oil house, before the oil house was there was an oil cellar. They basically just dug a hole and put stuff in the basement with, I assume, kind of a bulkhead door. And Jane says I always tell stories, and I do. One of the funny stories about that picture is when we were preparing for this presentation, pulled those down, we're looking at them again, and over the winter, I called, forgive me, Buck. He's Andrew, but I call him Buck. I called Buck, the president, and said, we got a little leak in the driveway. It's like a little hole. So I stuck a broom down, and it kept going. So he came down, tried again. So we finally dropped a little light in and realized that there was like a 6-foot hole under the asphalt, about 2-3 feet round, and you could kind of see the walls had like rocks pushed into it, like big polished stones. So we're thinking maybe it's a drain, something like that. As we prepare for this and we look at that drawing, I mean, considering it's a drawing, but pretty much in the exact same spot is clearly marked well. So that was a 100-century-old well that they probably filled in, and over 120 years or so, it settled in about 8 feet. So we had to hire someone to dig it up and put some dirt in, and if you look now, there's a little square where it is, like a memorial marker of sand. So again, we said we wanted to pivot a little bit to the life-saving station because so many people have been asking. And a lot of people think the lighthouse and the life-saving house were the same. They were both government-run, but totally different organizations. I mean, they were friendly, but they didn't do each other's job. So the original life-saving station was built in 1879. The station keeper, he was also called a station captain, he lived there year-round with his family. If there was something like a ship that was sinking, usually it was good weather, they just swam to shore, he would help them, make some phone calls or whatever. In the rescue season, in the winter, they hired 8 men. And those 8 men lived at the station almost like in the military. They had 2 days off a week, but they worked 5 24-hour shifts. It was really hard work. The pay was kind of very low. But these guys, when they were there, I mean, the middle of the winter, they still did drills. Every day they had a different drill. In addition to the drills, every single night or in bad weather during the day, the surfmen, one would go in either direction, 4 would stay at the station. And they would walk out. One would walk all the way to the end of Napatri, which, don't forget, before the hurricane of 38 was really all the way to the end of Sandy Point. Then it would cross over and come back on the bay side. And the other guy would walk down to Pleasant View, pretty much by the Andrea, and walk back. They would be looking for ships in distress, ships that had come ashore, and we didn't realize it. They carried it was on a strap, and it was almost like a time clock. And we got to the end of their patrol. There was a little, almost like a little bus stop hut, and they could go inside, and they would use the key to verify that they went to the end and they were there, and then they could warm up for a few minutes out of the wind before they walked back. And one of the things that they talked about was it was especially important when it was bad conditions, fog, rain, because the lookouts at the top, they couldn't really see that far. So this guy who was out walking would find a ship in distress or see something and then send a signal back. As soon as these 2 guys got back, 2 more guys would head out and they would go in the rest. One of the things they carried is a Costin signal, and we have one from the Lighthouse that's on display, compliments of Jack Spratt. And basically, they would carry these with them. Ships would have these as well. They basically had a wax ring so it would stay sealed, and you would just open it up, and then inside there was a rag soaked in 2 things. One was oil, so if it was during the day and you saw something, or if you were on a ship and you wanted a signal, you would light it, and it would be really black smoke. Like you really couldn't confuse it with a fireplace or something. But at night, when you lit it, the rag was also soaked with a chemical, magnesium, very similar to a marine flare today, that it would burn about this high, a pretty good flame of really bright, bright red. You couldn't confuse it for a campfire or something like that. So he would light this, put it on the beach to signal there was a problem, and start running back to the surf station to report what he found. Meanwhile, the guy on the lookout tower would look out, see it, ring the bell, and get everyone ready, because obviously something was coming. So this, again, is the first life-saving station. You can see the top has the lookout tower that Jane said was exposed. The 2 ramps, they had a total of 4 boats. No motorized boats in Watch Hill. So they had 2 boats that size were about 26 feet, and then 2 smaller boats. And on each one, the bigger boats came straight down the rails. One was in the bottom, the other one was up on the block and tackle, ready to drop once the first one slid down. The smaller boats were used for calmer weather, and I think also used for fishing and just general life. So we talked about the drills. The life-saving guys, the keepers just waved. They didn't have a problem unless there was stormy weather. But these guys, every single day, they would train. 2 o'clock, they'd go out, and it was all based on timing. They had to launch the boat, row to Fisher's Island, and get back in, say, 30 minutes. If they did it and got back, go enjoy yourself. If they didn't, go do it again. They had to meet that standard every single day. And you can kind of see it's a little off. So there's only 7 guys in the boat, and the station captain steering. So we're assuming on that drill day, one of them either was sick or had the day off. But normally there's 8
Or in the lookout.
oarmen. Yeah, it could be. So here's the part a lot of people don't know, that they all had to work other jobs in the summer to make ends meet. The government pay was not good. It was like $65 a month. And you worked, like I said, 5 24-hour shifts during the week in the winter. They're very structured. They did daily maintenance, the daily trainings, and then again, you kind of took a nap in the afternoon, because either 8 to 12, 12 to 4, or 4 to 8, you were going to be out on a patrol of the beach. So this is the part that a lot of people don't know about. The life-saving station, a lot of their work was a boat is sinking, you launch the surf boat, you row out, and you get them. But also a lot of their rescues were, if a boat was taken on water, or if a boat had a problem, they would instantly aim for shore. They would try to get to shallow water, but when they got to shallow water, especially in a storm, a bigger boat couldn't get up on shore. They were maybe, 100 feet out in the surf line. So they could get close to shore in safety, but they couldn't get off the boat at that point. So every life-saving station also had 2 carts. You can see the one over there has about 800 feet of rope on both reels, and in the middle it literally had a little cannon. They called it a Lyo gun. You'd put a gunpowder charge in, you'd fire it, it would shoot about a 1-foot long heavy projectile, and the goal was to try to shoot it with a rope attached and get it caught in the rigging of the ship. If you made a good shot and got it caught, then somebody on the ship would basically tie it off, and then this other cart carried the breeches buoy, all the ropes, all the block and tackle they had to set up, and basically they would then slide people one at a time in a life ring off the boat and to shore. And again, this was something that usually they did at the station. Sometimes they would set up on the beach, but the same thing. Drill for, say, Wednesday was you had to go out, you had to set it all up, fire the shot, wrap it around the mast, and as soon as you got someone off, you could go home. If you didn't do it within the 20 minutes, you did it again. But again, imagine, no horses back then. So imagine dragging these, a mile down the beach in the middle of a snowstorm and, freezing weather with only 8 guys. And then once you get there, you're exhausted from dragging it through the sand, but now you got to set up all the stuff. And then
make the save.
Yeah, make the save, and then when you're done, you got to pick it all up and go back, because you can't just leave it for tomorrow morning in case there's another one. These are all postcards in the Lighthouse collection, by the way, but a better shot of the front of them, what was on them. So one of the stories we wanted to tell, and you can read it, I'll just make up the facts as I go along. William Franklin Saunders was one of the first surfmen at the Watch Hill Station. He's born in Bradford, had 2 kids, married, and he was hired in 1879 at the age of 31 at the Surfman Station in Watch Hill. At age 44, he left Watch Hill to go to Quaney to become the captain, and he stayed there until 1901. And I think it's interesting, at age 53, his resignation letter basically said, "I'm leaving because I'm too old for this and you need younger people." I'm paraphrasing, but One thing you'll see is, there's a picture I think later. So you picture these guys, they're rowing out to boats sinking off Montauk, 10 miles away, towards Block Island, 7, 8 miles away, doing their thing, rescuing them, then rowing all the way back to Watch Hill. And you would think like they were World Wrestling Federation wrestlers, right? Massive guys. They weren't. They were just, everyone back then was just strong as bull and didn't know how to quit. So we just wanted to tell you one story, the Cleo Chilcot, in January of 1886, in a heavy gale and a strong snowstorm, it went ashore about 1.5 miles east of the Lighthouse. Probably about halfway down the golf course property, if you will. But this was a schooner carrying granite from Clark's Island in Maine, and they went ashore during a storm. And you can it's a picture from the next day, but you can kind of see how, even though they're close to shore, the waves are still going off the back of the ship. And so they climbed up in the rigging, waiting for help, and they saw the Coston signal lit. So they knew someone had seen them, they knew someone was coming. The life-saving station at Watch Hill dragged their stuff down 1.5 miles, blinding snowstorm, freezing cold, got there, set everything up, fired their line, and it missed. Set everything up, fired their line, and it missed. I'll give you a hint. They carry 12 lines on the cart. The 8th one hit. So they finally got it wrapped around after they saw the signal, but before the life surfmen got there, there was 3 people on the boat, the captain, the first mate, and the steward. They all climbed up in the rigging. The steward, because of the freezing cold, lost his grip and fell to his death in the surf. So the other 2 was hanging on in the rigging, waiting and waiting. So they finally get them off, they rescue them, they take them back to the station, and truly save their lives. And this is what we think is cool. So we've got the record from, we have Captain Davis's family donated 20 years worth of annual life-saving reports. So this one is from 1887, and it's basically the Life-Saving Service annual report to the people. It kind of lists their budget and whatnot for that year, and then it's got a short synopsis of every single rescue that they made. And it's just, I think we forgot to mention earlier, but Jane is also now our museum curator. So she takes care of the museum. She staffs it in the summertime, so you can kind of get a personalized tour. But she has been slowly transcribing all of the Watch Hill incidents, because it's kind of, you only want to open this book so many times and read it. So we got the story, and you can kind of read pretty much that. Did I miss anything? Just that it was Benjamin Clark, who was the guy, saw it, lit the Costin signal, ran back. They went out, and Captain Fuller was the captain of the ship. They carried them back to the life-saving station, treated them for their injuries, and a couple of days later, and we have copies of these in the museum records, a couple of days later, Captain Fullerton sent this letter to the Westerly Weekly, which was the precursor to the Westerly Sun. And literally, I mean, again, you can read it, but basically paraphrasing that, thank you very much. I thought I was going to die. You saved me. The people of Westerly should be proud of how hard they worked, and and you can see where it says, he ran all the way to the station, and then to the great exertion, the crew dragging, they called it the apparatus, but dragging those 2 wagons down. So we have a copy of this in the museum, and it kind of tells a pretty cool story of a boat wreck, the life-saving station seeing it, going out, saving their lives, and then 3 years later, he sends another letter, this time to the keeper, William Franklin Saunders, who we talked about earlier, sends a letter to him saying, hey, it's like whatever, New Year's Eve or the New Year here, I'm sitting at the table with my wife and my kid, and I realize that, I have my family, I'm back on my job, I'm alive, and this is all because of what you and your crew did, 3 years ago. And so he wrote it on the anniversary of it. So imagine what this guy was thinking, that 3 years later, he still said, I got to send a letter to those guys and remind them that they saved our lives. And I think it's just so, I just think it's so, I don't know, it kind of tear up even when I think about it now. Can you imagine what it was like back then? So what they did is they took their log and they sent it in, and then it was compiled into this book. So this is exactly what they wrote up as, you say, the incident report of the rescue and sent it in. The government just added it into the book.
I thought I heard you say there were 47 wrecks, and that's what I was retrieving, are all those documented?
So actually there was...
The 45 wrecks were actually in the Keeper Nash's first 27 years. We actually know that there were at least 265 wrecks off the coast.
But those were all documented.
We assume that they were
Most
documented
of
like
them, yeah.
this, but we only have
We don't-
books back to 1881.
We don't have all the books, but
Yeah.
this was how they were documented. So it seems like it was a good system, right? It was they had a way to do it, and I'm sure depending on the nature of the circumstances and how soon they could, sit down and get it documented, it was done.
Right. And it's funny, so they've changed a little bit. We also have records where, like the lighthouse keeper, after the life-saving station was closed, the lighthouse keeper had to record. So this is actually, just be careful of this one. This is very old. But in 1849, this was a page from the report book of how much oil they used and a few other things that happened during the day for the original lighthouse, not the second one. But, and then they switched to a more formal system. But it's funny, in 1963, we have the records of every daily log. The lighthouse keepers wrote the weather, anything happened. And one guy wrote, went off shift, nothing happened. Next guy wrote, came on shift at 18:05, found boat aground at Watch Hill Point. I don't know.
I didn't see anything.
I don't know. But that was the Leaf Viking. It was a big ship that came ashore and was stuck on shore for several weeks. But in that case, also in the report, so they had to take that report, which was handwritten, type it up, add any comments. The lighthouse keeper signed it, and then they had to have it notarized. Because there was an incident, they had to, and they couldn't really lie from their original handwritten, so they had to retype that, but then they could add, and then the added one, the lighthouse keeper says, and immediately after it happened, I looked and checked and made sure that every lighthouse was lit and every buoy was working properly. But where were you at 1803? But yeah, we really appreciate you coming. One thing we do want to tell you about quickly before we end. So the museum, somebody over here mentioned, oh, it looks really small. It is very small, but it's packed with stuff. There's stuff on the walls, there's stuff on the floor, there's stories of different wrecks and whatnot. But before we go, we wanted to just show you, because everyone says, well, I came to the lighthouse, I saw the museum, but I want to go up in the tower. And Jane kind of said it's just too dangerous. It really, the association board is trying to figure out a way to do it, but in the meantime, Greg Pettis made us this excellent, very short video that kind of shows you what it looks like inside. And as you watch it, if you listen real carefully, you'll hear Greg kind of panting and,
Yeah, he does a nice job of explaining what the lighthouse keeper had to do to keep the light
Right.
burning. So,
So just like 4 minutes.
Welcome to our virtual tour of the tower and lantern room of the Watch Hill Lighthouse. In 1855, construction of the current Watch Hill Lighthouse began. The granite for the tower was cut from the quarries in Westerly before being loaded onto large wooden carts. These carts were then pulled by oxen down Granite Street Hill and loaded onto barges, which transported the granite down the Pawcatuck River and around Napatree Point to be unloaded on Watch Hill Point. The new tower was completed in 1856. It is 45 feet high, which puts the light at 61 feet above sea level. Inside the square granite block tower is a circular round brick tower. The three-story tower is topped with a cast iron and glass lantern room that originally contained a Fresnel fourth-order lens. This beautiful original lens is still on site and can be seen in the museum. As we enter the tower and start climbing the 36 cast iron spiral steps, try to imagine the lighthouse keeper making this trip several times a day, carrying a bucket of whale oil to fill the open flame lamps that illuminated the Fresnel lens. As we reach the first of two windows, imagine the lighthouse keeper having to use this opening to pull the chains which raise the lead weights that turn the gears that turn the lens. Continue up. As we pass the second of the two windows and reach the top of the spiral stairs, we see the hand-crank telephone which connected the keeper with the fog signal house. Generally, the keeper would remain in the tower during severe storms, tending to the lantern, while the assistant keeper would remain in the fog signal building, tending to the compressor that ran the foghorns. The phone allowed them to stay in contact. The final 8 steps are up a ladder and through a hatch to the lantern room. The Fresnel lens was replaced in 1986 with a VRB 25 automated light, which alternately flashes red and white every 2.5 seconds. From the lantern room, we can see most of Watch Hill, as well as Block Island, Long Island, Fisher's Island, Napatree Point, Sandy Point, and Stonington. Let's enjoy the beautiful views for a few more moments before beginning our descent. As we begin our descent, imagine how difficult this round trip must have been for the lighthouse keepers. Regardless of the weather, regardless of the heat or cold, on sunny warm days and on cold windy nights, the lighthouse keepers made this trip every 4 hours, day after day, week after week, and year after year. During poor visibility, conditions like pouring rain, strong winds, and heavy fog, they would make this trip almost hourly to ensure the light remained visible. The Watch Hill Lighthouse Keepers Association owns and maintains the property, including the buildings and grounds. Our normal property hours are 8 a.m. to sunset. We want to thank you for taking this virtual tour with us. For more information, please visit our website at www.watchhilllighthousekeepers.org.
So 2 things to get from that. One is, yeah, it's a really cool view up top, but if you stand at the front of Watch Hill Point on the grass, you get the exact same view. You can see it all. And you can kind of see it's going up fairly easy, coming down is a lot harder. So before we end, we want to just tell you one more bit of news. The museum is open only in the summertime. You're welcome to come down and visit us. But the board was talking and the president was mentioning, well, we really want to get more people to come to the museum. So we asked around and we said, oh, why don't you come down to the museum? Well, I can't, I work during the week. Oh, well, we'll have hours on the weekends. Why don't you come down on the weekends? And what did every Westerly and Pawcatuck resident saying? I'm not going to Watch Hill on a summer weekend, right? So the museum this summer is going to be open its normal hours, 12 to 4, Tuesday through Friday. And the board has also agreed to stay open on Thursday nights from 4 to 8. We're not calling it Locals Night, but it's for the local people the chance to come down Thursday night. If you check the sunset time, that's the best time. Come down half an hour earlier, check the museum. If you look at the pictures, and the table ended up over there, but the sunsets are amazing from Watch Hill Point. So please come down and visit us. Well, I appreciate you coming, and thank you very much.
Thank you.